Okay. Severe inferiority complex. Their education isn't good enough. When they get money, they don't value a humanities education at all. And I think that's the Indian mindset, कि मेरा बेटा या तो डॉक्टर बनेगा या तो engineer बनेगा, नहीं तो फिर you're Gobar. Actually, Gobar has higher value than a humanities graduate in India. ठीक है? They never study the humanities, and they don't realize that historically, it is always the humanities that has controlled the sciences and not science that has controlled humanity. You tell me one scientist who ever became president.
You're now getting too deep for me. Okay.
But it's the truth.
Get to the point.
Humanities is how to control the human mind.
Okay.
Science is about controlling nature and the laws of nature. Humanities is about controlling the human mind. The right in this country does not invest in education. They don't invest in research. They don't invest in archiving. They don't invest in human beings. Right.
That's why all the think tanks in this country are all left. All the media is left.
Well, the think tanks aren't really left. The think tanks are non-committal. But you tell me...
The well-funded ones are left-leaning?
That's a whole different thing. That's a left ecosystem.
Okay.
It doesn't mean they're particularly perspicacious, because the Indian left also has certain very severe problems.
Okay.
We'll get to that soon.
Okay.
But let's talk about the rightward-leaning ones. In my experience, think tanks have a mix of both right and left.
Okay.
But mostly think tanks in India seldom do any research. They do events. Events are not research. You look at Western think tanks. I mean, for all your criticisms of them, that they're ideological, whatever, they become ideological. They actually invest hugely in going to the places they study, sitting and talking to people on the ground, meeting people, doing hard, painstaking ground research. Whether it's quackery or not, we can decide later. But in my experience, ground research always yields gold. Right? Let me give you a simple example with me. Do you remember when Doklam was happening in 2017? There was a lot of stories coming out, except nobody from the Indian side was going to Doklam. Right? It curiously happened that the end of my North Korea trip was also the beginning of my Tibet trip. So I happened to be in Lhasa, and I wanted to be in Lhasa. And I took the car, went past Shigatse, and got very close to Doklam, say about 100 kilometers away. And, I was looking at, because when you're coming into Shigatse, you can see the airport formations. When you're leaving Lhasa and coming into Lhasa, you can see the aircraft parked. What are the military aircraft parked on the tarmac? What are the armored vehicles in the marshalling yards around Lhasa and things like that? And it simply didn't add up with what we were hearing in the Indian press. There was no sense of urgency or alarm on the Chinese side. And they were actually quite surprised in Beijing by what was happening in India, because they hadn't expected that kind of a response from India. Now, that is called primary research, where you're actually going into the middle of this thing and looking at it. Now, very frequently, we don't have the money to go there.
Right.
So at least look at satellite imagery then. The satellite imagery doesn't tell you the whole story, but it can give you about 60-70% of the story at least. Who in India does that? Indians, I mean, you look at all these big houses, the media houses. They have money to do, leadership summit, your majesty summit, your excellency summit. Sab bade naamon ko, basketball player, tennis player, this they'll bring. They don't have money to spend on their main thing, which is to get you information, which is satellite imagery, or send a correspondent out there.
Now that we're talking about media, the media, international